Hey guys, William Murfitt here, and welcome back to another video, and welcome to a new car to the channel, the dreaded EV. So this Nissan Leaf, this Mark 1 Nissan Leaf, belongs to my brother, well my brother-in-law, and it needs rear brakes. So I'm quickly change these brakes. It's very cold this evening, let's just crack on and get these brakes sorted. So the 21mm socket to remove the wheels, and I just crack off all 5 of the nuts with the wheel still on the ground. And then once the wheels are cracked off, I can then lift the car slightly higher into the air, ready to remove the wheel. This just makes life a little bit easier when trying to remove that wheel, because you've got the resistance of the ground when you're trying to crack the nut off. One of the things I noticed with this was the hub was a little bit seized, so I had to give the wheel a bit of a tap to get that wheel off. But the wheel is off, and I can inspect the brakes now. And pleasantly surprised that the pads were in relatively good order. A bit of scoring on the disc, and maybe a slight inside of the disc not being used. But overall, very good. So, as you can see, only part of the disc actually being used, which isn't great. The pads, they look to have a bit of life left in them. We're looking down from the top, which is never a good sign, but hopefully a new set of pads. Now this, on a positive, looks to have the handbrake cable going inside the drum. So there's electric handbrake, so it's in the drum, so the caliper can be removed without having to touch anything. Because I couldn't find any information online of how to put this in service mode. Anyway, I've got a retaining nut up there, a bolt at the top, they'll come out, hopefully. Give it a quick wire brush, a bit of WD-40, and hopefully this should be caliper off, piston one back, new pads in, job done pretty quickly. Okay, so give this a bit of a scrub. I'm a little bit concerned by this top bolt. As you can see, it looks a little bit corroded, so some WD-40, use a bit of penetrating, and hopefully it's not going to snap. If it snaps, we're a little bit goosed. Hopefully this comes off pretty easy. I've got a 15mm, so bend that out of the way, get a socket and extension onto it. It should come off. Should be in the ultimate word. Just pushing the pads back onto the piston with the lever bar. The pads move nice and freely, but it's clear to see here that the sliders were seized and the caliper wasn't really working as efficiently as it should be. So that's the first of many issues. The top and bottom caliper bolts were very stiff, so I used a breaker bar to undo them. And once they first cracked, then they were pretty straightforward to come off. The lower one was a bit trickier to get out, which you'll sort of hopefully see shortly. But yeah, the two 14mm bolts come out, and you don't need to, there's no retaining nut on those at all, so which is quite handy. And they just wind out and they come out fully if need to. These look like we're absolutely corroded to death. They're not moving. Turn out to be quite free, which is good. But I will give them a clean the wire wheel just to make sure. The corrosion here, you can see on the back, it's not really secure to anything on the stone guard. That's a bit stiffer. Look how dry that is. Wow. Well, the caliper will slide back and forth along the shaft. If that's dry, and that's bone dry in there, or Yeah, well, it's living in there. There's not going to be any motion in there whatsoever, so clean this up, re-grease it, it'll slide back and forth nice and freely. Caliper off. So that's pushback one too, which is even better. I think I'm just going to give these a clean, to be honest. Not only were the slider pins seized, the inner pads on both sides of the car actually were really tough to get out. You should never have to hit these to get them out, but where the pads sit in the caliper carrier, they were just almost seized, so therefore the pads were permanently on. Right, so the pads are out of the car. Now, this is a brand new pad for this Nissan Leaf, and this is the pad that's on it. Now, I've got half the thickness of pad left because it's been sticking. Now, I'm going to clean these old ones up because there's a fair amount of stuff gone. But I think when they need changing, the discs need changing as well, really. So rather than putting new pads on, I'll clean these up and then we'll run them again for a little while, see how they get on. If it's continuing to squeak, then we'll look to change them. We've got the pads there, which is great. The issue lies with these sliders because there's no lubrication on them and they are just sticking. Annoyingly, they are different. So whether that's right or whether that's wrong, whether they should be up and down or down and up, I don't know. I need to try and have a quick Google on that. It could be a case that previously they've been fitted the wrong way, in which case one of them's thicker than the other and won't slide as much, meaning that the pad goes in and it just doesn't slide back out freely. But they are both bone dry, so that's not a great start. Let's clean these pads up. And hopefully that can be the biggest of the issues sorted. So if I shine this in the right light, you can see there's a real glaze on them, and that's what's going to cause sometimes squeaking pads. Piece of quite coarse sandpaper. You just really want to sand it. And then you're left with a friction pad which has got far less scoring on. I'm going to keep getting a bit more, but ideally it's a bit more of a matte finish. It'll still look a bit shiny in that. I suppose when you can compare the two, you can see there's an awful lot of difference between the two there. Right, done. I'll give these a quick clean up because there's no grease on the edges either. Now these ones here, I could clean up with this wire brush, but in true Blue Peter fashion, I'm going to clean it on the wire wheel. Be back in 3, 2, 1. There we go. So they are 2 cleaned bolts, or slider bolts, and hopefully that's going to be the answer to our issues. So I've got clean slider bolts, fresh pads. I'm going to have a quick look on the internet now to see which goes onto which place. I say it's either this way or this way. Now there must be a specific reason why there's 2 different ones. I just need to find out why and which way they go. So the great debate is whether the pin the rubber bushing goes at the top or the bottom. I've trawled the internet to try and find the answer, and quite frankly, there's lots of contradicting information. Now, it suggests that the pin with the bush goes to the top, so that when the bottom bolt is taken out, the caliper can rotate and pivot up, not having this pin flopping around and causing any kind of damage. But I can see what that is. Not. Ugh, that's grim. Right, let's do a bit of squirty in there. Work that back and forth. You can see already it's so much easier to operate and function. So I've got some copper grease. It's like my go-to for brakes, really. It's nice and free. Clean that off. Right, okay, so that's got grease in there, which is great. Grease in there too, which is great. Right, clamp it and squeeze and it'll push back. If it didn't push back, the chances of this being seized are quite high, which is handy it hasn't. So yeah, the pin with the bushing, in theory, doesn't need to move, and that can just lift up like this, fit the pads in, drop it back down, job done. In addition to cleaning the caliper carrier, the anti-rattle shims need to be removed and cleaned thoroughly as well, because they have a build-up of corrosion and stuff in there. So with them cleaned, the pads went in a little bit easier, which was handy. And the last thing just to be sure of is when you refit the caliper, is you refit the dust covers as well that go over those slider bolts. Because clearly I forgot that. Everything can now be tightened back down, but always remember that tight is tight and too tight is fudged. So you don't want to over tighten things, but you can see there that the caliper slid left and right, which means that the sliders are working effectively. Just cleaning up the hub now, so that should stop the wheel sticking and a bit of grease around the hub flange and onto the studs. 5 wheel nuts going on, and then once the car's on the ground, they will be torqued up accordingly. So a little bit backwards, but the pads are now cleaned up, refitted, the sliders are working fine, the pads are going on and off, which is great. Time to go do the other side, road test the car, and then deliver it back. But I'm going to go in now for some tea, and I'm going to leave this here, come back out in a bit, quickly do the other side, and you can come and join me for the road test. So the passenger side is pretty much exactly the same. Caliper carrier bolts were seized and the sliders were in poor condition. Everything was cleaned thoroughly and reassembled accordingly. Everything was greased upon reassembly as well, and we're ready now for a road test. Let's go. Right, the brakes are done. Couple of issues. The pads were good, the pads were pretty glazed, and the pads were stuck. So the sliders were stuck because I had no grease on them. So I freed those up, cleaned them up, greased them. The caliper's now sliding back and forth nice and freely. The second issue was the retaining springs, or the anti-rattle springs. They were very tight in the upper and lower on the inner, which is the caliper side pad. So the pad is actually stuck onto the disc. I think we caught it pretty early. And I just decided to take the car, just a little loop, and I heard a grinding noise. So I jacked the back wheel up, and well, these are the dust covers, or the I guess the splash covers for the rear discs. Well, they are no more because this one fell off and this one was dragging on the disc. So
other than going into the scrap pile, it's pretty much done. So I'm going to take it down for a drive. I'm going to go just up the road. Doesn't need to go far because I haven't really done a lot. But I have saved the owner of the car, my brother-in-law, a fair whack of money. The pads were recommissioned in theory. They were unglazed. They were cleaned up. All the dirt taken off them. The edges were filed down a little bit to give a bit more movement back and forth. And overall, very happy with how they are. Obviously, the proof is in the pudding when I take it for a run up the road. But I think overall, that's a pretty good result. So when this needs the brakes doing next time, the discs will need doing. So we got away with not doing the discs this time, or the pads. So bit of a clean up and go again. So let's go for a road test, and I will see you shortly. So in here, this is the first generation Leaf, whereas ours over there is second generation. So a little bit different on the dashboard. This one has had a few modifications to make sure it works, which we won't really need to go into. But into drive, handbrake off. Let's go for a road test. Very foggy this evening. I'm sure we should do an emergency stop. 1, 2, 3. Oh, that is very good. Anyway, I'm pretty happy how the brakes are performing. Doesn't seem to be any whirring. A slight noise from the disc on the front left where the window is open. But overall, I think it's fair to say the brakes are working as they should. There's no grinding or whirring noises from the rear, or definitely no squealing noises either. So I should turn the car around. Actually, this may be the first time I've ever driven this car. I think historically I've refused. Let's go head back. Let's get this car delivered off. Righto, so hopefully I'm not right in the screen, but pretty successful evening. The car is sorted. It's now time to return it. So thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this, then I'm sure there'll be more on this car coming soon. If you have enjoyed this video, hit the thumbs up button, comment down below, and if you haven't done so already, please consider becoming a subscriber to the channel. Really, it does mean a lot to me, and I say it every time, but it really does. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you again soon.